Thanks for listening to the Mornings with Carmen LaBerge podcast, made available thanks to support from listeners just like you.
Helping you wake up, remembering this is our Father's world. This is Mornings with Carmen LaBerge on Faith Radio.
If we're gonna fly, we fly like eagles, arms out wide. If we're gonna fear, we fear no evil. We will rise. By your power, we will go. By your spirit, we are bold. If we're gonna stand, we stand as giants. If we're gonna walk, we walk as lions.
Good morning. Good morning, good morning, good morning. It is 5/7. Does that mean anything to you? It's the 7th of May. Does that date mean anything to you? It happens to be my wedding anniversary, so 5/7 bears out some meaning in my life. Wonder if it bears out meaning in your life as well. You can always text me. The text line's open, 877-933-2484. When I say love, where does your heart go? Does it go to a person? Does it go to a place? Does it go to a thing? When I say love, where does your heart go? Like, sit with that for just a moment. When I say love, where does your heart go? Do you feel yourself maybe in a lap as a child with arms secured around you? Do you feel yourself being held on a dance floor? I don't know. When I say love, where does your heart go? Does it go to a place? Is home where your heart is? And if so, where is home? When I say love, where does your heart go? Does it go to an activity or a group, a team, a thing? When I say love, where does your heart go? For some people, if they are really honest, the answer is money. And God knows that. God knows there's a love of money among us. And I think that when we talk about love, if we're having a hard time identifying what we love, then what if we asked it differently? Because we love what we trust. And so, do you trust a person enough to give and receive real love? Do you trust a place? Like, is that because you feel secure there? Like, is that for you kind of the definition of how love works? It's really about trust. We rely first and finally and foremost on that which we trust the most. And so our money actually says, in God we trust. But what do our actions say? Do our actions say that in God we trust, or do our actions say that, well, kind of in money we trust? If you have a financial planner or a wealth advisor, then, some measure of accumulated assets, maybe you own a farm, the word trust actually means something else, doesn't it? You've got a land trust or a farm trust or a charitable trust or some kind of remainder trust or a living trust. I want you to consider the application of the word trust to those things and how over the course of time, having those kinds of trusts and having conversations in our culture about institutions that we trust or people who are trustworthy, how that might have changed our hearts toward the idea of trust and the kind of sacred trust we have with God. God has entrusted you with your life. He has entrusted you with the very breath of life. He has entrusted to your stewardship and to your management creation itself. God demonstrates a lot of trust in our direction. God has entrusted us with the indwelling power of his Holy Spirit. He's entrusted us with the church. He places a living trust in us. Like, that's incredible. Do we genuinely trust him? Do we trust God as the executor and the guarantor of all our trust? We love what we trust. So, what do you trust if you're having a hard time figuring out what you love? Our Growing Your Faith verse of the day comes from Psalm 25. I commend to you Psalm 25 in like a reading of this whole section of Psalms. Like start with Psalm 22 and work your way through Psalm 25 and just see what a praying heart looks like and all the things that God reveals in his word. I want the word of God to be in us before we get out there into the world that God so loves. The world's going to pressure us today. It just is. I don't know the ways in which the world is going to squeeze you today, but I know the world's going to put the squeeze on you. So what's going to come out? Let's get the word of God into us so that what comes out is grace and truth. Our Growing Your Faith verse of the day comes from Psalm 25, the first 2 verses, although I commend the entire psalm to your reading. David says, "In you, Lord my God, I put my trust. I trust in you. Do not let me be put to shame, nor let my enemies triumph over me." In you, Lord my God, I put my trust. I trust you. Do you trust God today? Do you trust God to be God and God to be good? You can trust him. A lot of folks around the world putting their hope and trust in chariots, or the modern day equivalent of chariots. 2 headlines out of Russia this morning. Vladimir Putin has been sworn in or inaugurated for another 6-year term as the president of Russia, effectively making him Russia's president for life. Just no escaping that reality. And on the eve of Putin's inauguration, Russia summoned the British ambassador to the foreign ministry, Moscow, and warned that Ukrainian strikes on Russian territory using UK-supplied weapons. So just think about that for a moment. Ukraine has been supplied with weapons from around the world, including many, many, many NATO-related countries. And what Russia is saying now, specifically they're saying it to the UK, but they're signaling it to all of us. Ukrainian strikes, so the use of UK-supplied, British-supplied weapons that are now being used by Ukraine to strike in what Russia considers its territory, that's important to note, could unleash, here's the language, retaliatory strikes on British military facilities and equipment in the Ukraine and elsewhere. They also said they intend to hold drills simulating the use of battlefield nuclear weapons. So, as we might have been paying attention to other things, protests on college campuses, the Met Gala, whatever's holding our attention here in the United States, the world is at war, and we ought not forget it. We're going to turn our attention here in just a moment to what is happening on university campuses across the country. Our friend Nick Pitts is going to join us. That's up next here on Mornings with Carmen. Hey, our brother Nick Pitts is joining us. What's going on college campuses? What's up with the kids today? Good morning, Nick.
Why, hello, Carmen. Happy Tuesday to you.
Happy Tuesday. Where did you go to school?
I couldn't stick at one school. They kept on forcing me out. I was a rabble-rouser. So I started off at Austin Peay for undergrad, then did a little work at Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary in Fort Worth, and then concluded all the grad work at Dallas Baptist University here in Dallas, Texas.
Okay. My academic experiences in terms of higher ed are the University of Florida and Princeton Theological Seminary. So, started a little work at Columbia Seminary in terms of a doctorate, but I finally just decided that that's just piled higher and deeper, and I didn't pursue that for very long. So, but let me just say this: I can't remember I mean, that's that's a lot of time on a lot of campus. Let me just say, like, that's a
Oh
lot
yeah.
of, that's a lot of extra schooling. Um, and, and I do not recall anything like what we are seeing now across the country. So let me just read people in. Columbia University, which is an Ivy League school in New York City, if you're not familiar with it, they have now canceled their commencement ceremonies. The formal, the big one. So there's going to be, each of the colleges is going to hold its own commencement. So it'll be smaller, it'll be more intimate. It might actually end up being more meaningful to students. But it's only because they can't hold a big one. They're not canceling it because they think this is the better way. They're canceling it because they have to. They feel like they have to. Weeks of anti-Israel, pro-Hamas protests, including encampments, the seizure of a building, open threats toward Jewish students, and what can only be characterized as just really gross displays of anti-Semitism. Now, this is what's going on at Columbia. It's also happening at the University of Southern California, which their campus is now closed, and they are also not holding commencement ceremonies. But it's not happening everywhere. The University of Florida, MIT, examples of places where the things are happening very differently. So read us in on this, Nick. Like, what's the difference in maybe what's happening at USC and Columbia versus what's happening, let's say, at the University of Florida?
Yeah, so for example, I've got about 9 years worth of higher education experience from undergrad all the way to finishing up grad work. And then I also served as a college minister for 4 years after all of that. So I'm a little, again, that's been a few years ago that I care to admit, realizing that I'm getting old just even thinking about it. But these temperaments and these sentiments that we're seeing play out on college campuses isn't unique, I would say. It's always been there. I mean, we can go all the way back to the founding. The college campus was always a unique place where protests have taken place. I mean, you can go back all the way to Harvard in 1766, before we were even a country, and they had the Great Butter Rebellion because the butter stinketh. It was a line from history. But nevertheless, like you said today, it's a lot more volatile. It's a lot more intense, and it's illegal, and it's just hateful. Period. Of what we're seeing, and you can kind of parse this out to a couple of different ways. One, you've got university administrators that were looking for these type of students, these rebellious, stick it to the man students, because they themselves were that when they were in school, and now in turn they don't realize that they are the man, they are the person in charge, and they're not taking that charge. Or you can also point back to what's happening, like you said, at the University of Florida. Hand up, I am a big Ben Sasse fan. Loved him.
I know. Could we just could Ben Sasse just be everybody's president? I mean, he's the president of the University of Florida, but like, I'm just like, let's just get that guy. Let's just go get that guy.
Just incredible what he did. And so what he penned a Wall Street Journal op-ed that's, I guess you could say, has gone viral, that really does just how they have decided to approach the encampments and the protests. And he said it's driven by three basic truths. One, you distinguish between speech and action. Two, you mean what they say and then say what they do, and then do what they say. And then three, recommit to real education. Sasse has always been this. This goes back to his books, his first book on the American adult, talking about the idea that we have to. The best arguments deserve counter arguments. Free speech was something that was enshrined and is special, but speech isn't violence, but violence is violence, and we have to ward off against violence because we are a civilized society that has this free speech that we can go back and forth with our ideas. The second being, when a university official and when leadership says that if you break the rule, then in turn you have to deal with the consequences. And what we're seeing in Florida, as compared to what we're seeing in, say, Columbia, is that in Florida, they're actually enforcing the consequences of individuals that break the rules. Whereas at Columbia, they are negotiating and they are not enforcing the rules. And then the third piece is recommit to real education. He writes that we're a university, not a daycare. We don't coddle emotions. We wrestle with ideas. This is something that I really took from him in his book, Them. He talked about this idea of wanting to have a broadened mind and having a bookshelf that has your top 100 books. So what are those 100 books you want to make sure that your child reads before they leave your house? Those formative books. And I've been wrestling with my own little bookshelf of 100 books that I think are the classics that I hope little Dottie and little Francis read before they leave my house. And so I really do think that, one, education obviously takes place in the institution, but also it takes place in the home as well.
Rosemary is arriving in June, and she wants to be a friend of Dottie and Francis. I'm just going to go ahead and say it.
She can come on. She just needs patience, because she's going to have to put up with the pits. That's for sure.
It's super fun, right? So yeah, buying books for the bookshelves has already been really fun. As I anticipate the arrival of Rosemary in June and Liam in August, and I get to be, this is a different stage of life for me, and so I get to make my own bookshelf as well, in addition to, giving them really good books. So I'm just buying 3 copies of everything, and I'm that way. Whatever book that I'm only buying books that I like. So whatever book they end up having as their favorite will also be at my house. So like, oh, can we read whatever? It'll be right there. I'm hoping that everybody loves The Velveteen Rabbit.
I feel very good about that.
Because that's one of my favorites.
I feel very good about that.
Yeah, I love The Velveteen Rabbit. All right, so we're going to take a very, very brief break. When we come back, we're going to continue our conversation with Nick. We're gonna pivot subjects here just ever so. Oh well, I don't know. Maybe you might think it's a hard pivot. If time is money, like, have you ever thought about that? If time is money, then what is your time worth in terms of money? Could you put a value on it? Would it surprise you that your neighbor thinks their time is worth $240 an hour? Why don't you do the math? Why don't you do the math and think about, if time is money, what do you think your time is worth? We'll get back to that in just a moment. You're listening to Mornings with Carmen.
This is Susie Larson, host of Susie Larson Live. Maybe you have a loved one that you've been praying for years, and they still haven't trusted Jesus. Or maybe you have a loved one who once had a vibrant faith, but has since walked away. If this is true for you, know this: you're not alone. God sees you, He loves you, and He knows about the heartache you feel. And we care about it too. I've recorded 15 audio clips to encourage your soul. Text the word HEART to 877-933-2484.
Time is money. You've certainly heard someone say that at some point. So if time is money, then what is your time worth? Nick Pitts is here with us. We're looking together at a USA Today article in which we are learning about a survey of Americans. On average, Americans valued their time at $240 an hour. So I just want you to think about that for just a moment. And wow, how much less than that we're actually making. So we think our time is worth way more than we're being paid. How does that work on our psyches over time? And maybe how generationally do we think about the value of our time in terms of money? So, Nick, read us in on this.
Yeah, just absolutely remarkable. Average American, like you said, thinks their time is worth approximately $240 an hour. Just to put that into perspective, that's like making a little under $500,000 a year. And so not bad, to say the least, especially since that's 8 times higher than the average U.S. salary of just under $60,000. As a millennial, it surprises me not that we place the highest value on our time at $328. And but then we have everyone from Gen X saying their time was worth $215, and boomers saying their time was worth $137. I was talking to Lauren about this the other night, and I think that there is a distinction to be made that makes this a little bit more kind of palatable, makes sense, adds a little context to it. So, for example, I do not think my time is worth $240 an hour, but I would make a distinction between my time working and my time at home. And so if you were to tell me I'd
Mm.
take away an hour of my time that I have with Dottie at night, when I really only have approximately 2 hours before she has to go to bed by 7 o'clock, if 2 hours, if that, I do place a higher value on that time than I would say my time from 10 to 11 o'clock when I'm reading or when I'm spending time just kind of working through some ideas on my own or writing, for example. So I do think there's a distinction with time that we have between our free time and then our time that we spend with our loved ones. But it's still pretty remarkable how highly we think of our time.
Yeah, you can't buy time. The concept of free time is interesting. Like you're using up the one resource you can never get any more of. Like, right? And so it does have value. It has great value. I only have a certain number of hours, days, weeks, months, years of life, and it'd be better if I would think about how I use the moments of my day that I consider quote unquote free time. If I really treated them as highly valuable time, I might think more seriously about how I spend them.
Oh, yeah. So the average adult wastes 26 days a year. This equates to approximately 2 hours a day. And you think about this. And so I was looking up some of the research. And so just think about now, not all time spent on your phone and all time watching TV is wasted time. But I think we can all agree that we do waste a portion of our time watching stuff that we probably didn't want to watch, or spending time on our phone because we kind of miraculously ended our way on some random app when we opened our phone to look at our email, for example. So the average American is spending a little over almost 4 hours, 3 hours, 43 minutes a day watching live TV, and 3 hours, 46 minutes on their phone. And this gets into what's called opportunity cost, right? It's when you look back on your day, were there moments where you only meant to watch one episode, but you ended up watching 5 episodes, so you burned that up. That's an opportunity cost. That's a loss. You only meant to check your email on your phone, but somehow you ended up scrolling on YouTube or TikTok or Twitter for 20, 30 minutes. And like you said, you don't get that time back. A stark reminder a mentor told me is, you are the youngest you will ever be for the rest of your life at this very moment. You're not getting any younger from here on. And there is not going to be another Tuesday morning at 6:25 that I get. And I'll tell you, Carmen, it's not just because I'm talking to you. It's because I believe in what you do, and I love what we get a chance to do. I don't want to spend my time doing anything else. This is what I want to spend my moments with. This is how I want to spend my 6:30 in the morning on Tuesdays, every other Tuesday. These are these Lazarus moments that I say. The rich man, when he passed away, he was yearning to be able to go back to life because he wanted to be able to share. He wanted to be able to do a couple of more things while he still had breath. Whereas Lazarus just lived his life to the fullest and then experienced the fullness of life after he died, being in the presence of Jesus. I don't want to miss a moment, a gift that we've been given. And so as I look back on the end of my day, I want to make sure that I didn't waste 2 hours. There will be time that's wasted, but I'm hoping that it minimizes each and every day because I see the preciousness that is this time that we've been given.
And I think that there are, we might imagine that it's always an act of service. It's always something where we are making a sacrifice that is the better spending of the time. And that's often true. But I don't want us, if you're listening right now and you think, Carmen and Nick are just talking about exhausting ourselves, pouring ourselves out for others and doing all the good we can do. Yeah, that's some of it. But there is also the precious, precious time that is spent being still and quiet with Jesus. And so how is God calling you to spend your time today? The value of it is expressed by how you spend it. And so spend your time today doing things of real value. Some of that may be in sacrificial service to others. Some of it may be sitting quietly and letting God love you in ways that only God can. Some of it might be sowing peace or seeking reconciliation. That might be the best investment of your time today. Sitting with the Word of God, reveling in the goodness of His creation. And doing all the good, every good work that God has prepared in advance for you to do today. All of that would yield hours well spent, a day well spent, and then ultimately a lifetime well spent. Nick, what a joy. Thank you so much. We don't want to spend this time with anybody else either, so thank you so much for the investment of your time with us today.
Great to be with you, Carmen.
Absolutely wonderful. Big international news out of Rafah today, the southern end of the Gaza Strip. Rafah, we've been talking about Rafah for some time now. You know that it borders, the Mediterranean, or it's on the Mediterranean Sea. It borders Egypt and Israel. The Rafah crossing has been at issue. Rafah and an invasion of Rafah has been a very important point of conversation between the United States and Israel in terms of our expectations that Israel will continue to do everything they can to protect innocent civilians. And so as Israel used every way possible to notify people in a particular portion of Rafah, near the Rafah crossing, that it was time for them to evacuate the area and move to humanitarian facilities where they would be safe, pretty much everybody did that before the Israeli forces took control of both sides of the Rafah crossing in this military effort, part of the ongoing response of Israel to the October 7th incursion by Hamas terrorists. Hostages still being held 213 days in. Israel obviously wants those people returned. Now, obviously, there are conversations about those individuals being returned dead or alive. And in the midst of all of that, we have these anti-Israel protests on U.S. college and university campuses, resulting in the suspension of graduation ceremonies and the premature closure of some campuses before the end of the academic year. Luke Moon has actually been on the Columbia campus for some pro-Israel events, and he's got another one coming up at the University of Southern California tomorrow. Thought it would be good to talk with Luke again today about the Jews on this anniversary where in 1945, when Germany signed an unconditional surrender to bring an end to World War II, and on the hills of Holocaust Remembrance Day. So next up, Luke Moon, and let's be talking about our relationship with the Jews. That's up next here on Mornings with Carmen. What in the world is going on in the world? What is happening in Israel? How did you observe Holocaust Remembrance Day? All of those questions and conversations before us with our friend Luke Moon. He's the executive director of the Philos Project. You can find him at Philos, that's Philos, philosproject.org. Luke, welcome back. Good morning.
Good morning, Carmen.
Dude, I saw you with a bullhorn. I'm just saying, it was quite the look. It was quite the look, and I had to scroll the tape. I had to watch more than once because I thought to myself, okay, do they have bulletproof vests on under their Philos t-shirts, or are those puffies? And I finally decided that it was cold enough outside that guy that you were walking with, he was wearing a puffy under his t-shirt. But at first glance, I thought, man, these guys they're at the Columbia University campus and they're marching in a pro-Israel thing. They're carrying pro-Israel flags and they've got their bullhorns out and they're wearing bulletproof vests. And then I realized, okay, it's a puffy. That made me feel a little bit better.
No, it was a little chilly that day, but we wanted to, wear our Philos t-shirts. We had them rush ordered so that we could wear them.
It's good. It was good. All right. So tell people about that. And you're headed to the University of Southern California as well. I think that event is tomorrow. So talk with us about what you're doing. Like what Why do Christians need to be off the sidelines and in the streets while other people are in the streets? Like, what is the point of counter protesting?
Well, I would say it is standing up for America and for our common Judeo-Christian values. I mean, that's what I'm standing for. And I figured, listen, I cannot stand to watch all the what I'm calling the unity of the red and the green standing against the red, white, and blue. Right? It's the hatred of America and Israel. I mean, really, they hate Israel and then America. But what they hate is the people who believe the Bible is true. The Bible's the word of God. And because I think they see that we are in the way of their plan for global domination, right? They actually, even if it's not global domination, they hate the things we stand for. And so I think it's important for Christians to get used to standing, rallying, because I think we have a bit of atrophy, or maybe we've never done this before. But I think it's important for people who want to really push back against this evil to begin marching, standing, showing up at rallies, showing up and expressing their voice in moments like this. I mean, Carmen, I was asked to organize a rally at Columbia for 500 people. I was like, I don't know. And we had, according to NYPD, 5,000 people show up.
Wow.
And I was blown away. There was a moment where I had to step into an alcove and kind of weep for a second to catch my composure, because I could not believe that many people had shown up. And so yeah. And so we're doing it again here in Los Angeles. I'm actually here now. It's 4:30 in the morning.
Really early in the morning.
Yeah, it's really early, Carmen. And I'm here tomorrow night at 5:30 at the University of Southern California. We are doing it again. We're going to march. We're going to have bullhorns, and we are going to show the world that Christians and Jews are united against the kind of evil that we're seeing on college campuses around America.
You can check out philosproject.org. You can go to their social media. You can find them on Eventbrite. I'm happy to send you the direct link if you happen to be in Southern California or able to travel there by 5:30 Pacific time tomorrow, May the 8th. Love to have folks engaged in this.
And it's exciting too, because May 8th is VE Day, victory over the Nazis, actually.
Yeah, it's good. It's a good day to do it.
It is. It is very. And we didn't pick it. We didn't pick it knowing it was VE Day. We picked a date and then found out it was VE Day. And so we're excited to. We're going to use. So
I want to talk about Holocaust Remembrance Day, and I want to talk about it with you in particular by you taking me back to Yad Vashem. Tell people what Yad Vashem is, where it is, and what I learned there, Luke, is that the Holocaust didn't start with the construction of ovens where people were gassed and then burned. I want you to take us to Yad Vashem so that we can all remember again, maybe for the first time, how these things start, so that we can see the evidences around us in real time.
Yeah. So Yad Vashem is Israel's Holocaust memorial. It is just outside of Jerusalem. It's kind of on a hill, and it is. You walk down this kind of wooden ramp, and when you're walking, the sound that the ramp makes is the sound of rail cars going across, any kind of, wood, basically. And then you get through, and you see this mural of Jews who were playing music and dancing, and it was like gives you the idea of what Germany and Poland were like in the early 30s. And then you round the corner, and the first image that is there's a depiction of two statues, Ecclesia and Synagogia. And Ecclesia represents the church, and she has her head held high. She has a crown on her head. She is proud and strong. She has a staff, and then next to her is Synagogia, who's blindfolded. Her crown is at her hand. Her staff is broken, and she has like the book at her side. And that depiction of the church over the synagogue is depicted on it's actually a statue that's in cathedrals all over Europe to this day, actually. And then you kind of wander through it, and there's all these there's board games of go back to Palestine, and Jews as cockroaches, Jews as worms, Jews as snakes, Jews as money hungry, like lots of depictions of that. And there's pictures of Hitler with priests in their collars. There's depictions of like just the dehumanization, the dehumanization. And then as it continues, you see it becoming the kind of attitude towards the Jews becomes much darker, and then it becomes violent. To your point about it doesn't start with ovens, it ends with the ovens. And there was I saw this yesterday, this exchange between I guess some worship people or evangelists were kicked out of Mall of America yesterday, in an exchange between two Christians, and one saying, well, that's not real persecution. I've talked to people who have really been persecuted, and I always kind of recoil at that kind of attitude because I said, like you said, persecution doesn't start with the ovens, with the mass murder. That's how it ends, but it starts with the dehumanization, the kind of the law. There was Kristallnacht, which destroyed all the Jewish businesses. Jews were prevented from entering campuses by Nazis. Professors were kicked out of universities. There was boycotts against Jewish professors at universities. Many of the things that we're actually seeing today, and this all took place in a country that was the most advanced country in the world at the time. It was the equivalent of, technologically, it was the equivalent of the United States of America, to where we are today, in a technological advancement way, and yet they used that to murder 6 million Jews. And so the whole country I've been in Israel on Holocaust Remembrance Day, and there's a point in which the sirens blare all across the country, and the country comes to a standstill, literally stops. Everybody stops.
Mm-hmm.
The cars on the road stop.
Mm-hmm. And people get out. I watched a video yesterday. They get out of their cars. Yeah.
Yep. And I was walking down the street, and all of a sudden the sirens blare, cars stop, everybody gets out of their car, people step out of wherever they're at, they stop. And
we're going to have, just so that we're going to have your friend Rabbi Rami Goldberg on tomorrow to actually talk about that. Like, can you come on and talk about, like, because you pulled over because he posted a picture, and I'm like, can we talk about that? Like, what is that like? Anyway, so he's going to join us tomorrow from Israel 365. Luke, let's take a very, very brief pause here in our conversation. When we come back, I want to talk with you about this effort by the U.S. Congress to expand maybe the definition of anti-Semitism. I want to talk with you about what that word means, and kind of how we talk about it, how it is used, and what it really means in the culture today. We're talking with Luke Moon. He is the executive director of the Philos Project. What does anti-Semitism mean? You hear it thrown around a lot as a word. What does it really mean? What does it mean to you? How do you know when you see it? What do you do when you see it or hear it? That's up next here on Mornings with Carmen. As we consider the life of Jesus and the life of the first generation of Christians, reading here the book of Acts and all the letters to the Christians in the New Testament, we see people who wake up. They come to see and understand and then receive Jesus as their Savior and Lord. And it changes everything. We see Christians then telling other people about the good news and inviting them to respond in repentance, be baptized, and follow Jesus. The movement of Christianity grows person by person and then exponentially as people walking in darkness receive the light of Christ and want others to know what they know and have what they have. Well, you and I are living in dark days. People need light. And Jesus is the light of the world today in the same way that he was the light of the world at the beginning of creation and at the first Christmas and throughout his life on earth and in his radiance now at the right hand of the Father. Jesus is the light of the world. So if you're walking in darkness of any kind today, I invite you to consider Jesus. If you'd like to know more about what it means to begin a relationship with Christ or to chat with someone about it, just text the word faith to 41224. What is hate speech? What is anti-Semitic hate speech? What is anti-Semitism? The U.S. Congress is in the middle of a process of passing an Anti-Semitism Awareness Act. It passed by the House of Representatives last week, and it's now before the U.S. Senate. Certainly, we want to be people who recognize and stand up against anti-Semitic speech. What does it look like when we start talking about using the administrative state to police speech, even this kind of speech? So we're talking with Luke Moon today. He is the executive director of the Philos Project. Luke, what is anti-Semitism? How do we recognize it? What do we do when we hear it or see it?
Well, it depends on who you ask what anti-Semitism is. I define anti-Semitism as a rational hatred of Jews rooted in the fact that they're the people by whom God brought his moral revelation into this world. The world hates them for it. That is not the definition, however, that that was used, or part of the definition used for this piece of legislation that was in Congress this week. Their definition is what's called the IRA definition, the International Holocaust Remembrance Associations. It's kind of the working definition, and it says anti-Semitism is a certain perception of Jews which may be expressed as hatred towards Jews. Rhetorical and physical manifestations of anti-Semitism are directed towards Jews or non-Jewish individuals and or their property, towards Jewish community institutions and religious facilities. And this definition is probably the one that's adopted the most. The State Department has adopted it. Most state legislatures have adopted this definition. And there was obviously some criticism about this, as hate speech. Now, I'm stuck. Probably there's good people. It's good people on both sides. Al Mohler and Yoram Hazony came out against it, and John Hagee and some other Christian Zionist leaders came out in support of it. I'm somewhat of a free speech absolutist, Carmen. I actually think that, people should be free to say whatever they want, because once that we get that hate speech thing going, it's hard to stop. And that, the seeds of your current problem, the solution to your current problem are the seeds of the next one. I mean, prayer got kicked out of schools because of anti-Catholic legislation in the United States about 30, 40 years before. All of the anti-busing legislation, there was a ton of anti-Catholic legislation in the United States in the 20s and 30s and stuff. And all that got used later against us. And it was the cause of the prayers getting kicked out of schools. And so I'm very hesitant always to get on board with any kind of hate speech. As much as I fight anti-Semitism, I also get very uncomfortable with hate speech legislation. But it's really, a lot of it has to do with singling out and holding Jews to a standard that no other people is held to. And I think it's one of the reasons why I think a lot of anti-Semitism, and let's call it anti-Israel stuff, is anti-Zionism. The two combined is it's Jew hatred at its root, but it's really scapegoating. And it's so weird. It's so irrational. It turns up in the weirdest spots, often by people who have mental illness, that it just makes me think, man, there's something deeper here than just, like we don't hate any other person, any other group of people on the planet the way that we collectively, the rest of the world, hate the Jews. It's so strange to me. And it's one of the reasons why I think there's that, that I'm so supportive of Israel and the Jewish people, is because if the world is that fervently against them, it must be spiritual, which means that God is on their side, and I'm going to be on the side that God's on. And even if the Jews don't reciprocate and be nice to me, I don't care, because I think that they're still got a place in God's heart, and I'm gonna keep showing up, because Luther, at the beginning of when he did the 95 Theses, 95, and he was like very pro-Jewish, pro-Jewish. The Catholics treated the Jews wrong and treated them poorly. And at the end of his life, he wrote a book called The Jews and Their Lies, which was a proper anti-Semitic screed that was used by the Nazis to kill Jews. And I think he flipped because the Jews didn't reciprocate his, action of affirmation of love, right? I really want people to recognize that you might not ever get any kind word, or you probably will now, but don't let it go to your head. And we just got to do this because to me it's clear that there's still something.
It's the
special.
right thing to do. Yeah,
exactly.
We gotta wrap it right there, Luke. Thank you. We're going to be praying for you, God's favor and protection upon you and others tomorrow night at your event at the University of Southern California in Los Angeles. Again, you guys can connect directly with Luke and the work of the Philos Project at philosproject.org. We got another hour together next, so stay tuned. Thanks for listening to Mornings with Carmen LaBerge. Podcasts like this are available because of your support. If it's important to you to hear things that encourage your faith, click the link in the show notes to give now. And thanks.